Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
The widow forgot the will and returned home. But after accidentally overhearing her mother-in-law's phone conversation, she almost screamed. A light breeze played with her hair, but it didn't cause any irritation. Serena Rivas even closed her eyes from the pleasure, but the high-pitched voice of Esma didn't let her completely escape from reality. Mommy. Tell him to stop throwing dirt at me. Serena couldn't help but sigh with regret at the realization that she had to return to the present. She opened her eyes and immediately squinted from the blinding sunlight. Esma, be more clear. Who's bothering you? The girl pointed a finger at Zacharias, who was enthusiastically digging with a small toy shovel. Him. Another sigh escaped the mother's lips. Kids, what is it that you're fighting over again? You even managed to argue while we're out for a walk. Mom, it's all him. I told him he can't do that, but he's still throwing dirt at me on purpose. Esma stood a little distance away from the oddly shaped bench where the young woman was sitting. The girl was puffing like a little steam engine from indignation, her arm outstretched toward her younger brother. The boy, meanwhile, was stabbing the ground with his toy shovel, grunting from the effort. The earth was stubborn, clumps of dirt flying in all directions. When one of the clumps hit Esma's dress, she shrieked far too loudly. Zacharias, are you completely stupid? Mom, see? He's doing it on purpose just to annoy me. Serena calmly suggested to her daughter. If you move out of the way, the dirt won't reach you, and each of you can enjoy your playtime. But the girl wasn't satisfied with that option and defiantly declared, I picked this spot first, and I'm older than him. He should go somewhere else instead of always following me around. She half turned and waved toward the area with garbage bins. He should go over there and dig in the dirt. That place by the trash is perfect for him. Without stopping his digging, 5-year-old Zacharias advised his sister. You go there yourself. And stop bothering me, I'm building something. The serious look on her son's face made Serena smile. Sweetie, what are you building? The little boy wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand, just like an adult, and said with great importance. A subterranean garage. Dad showed me one recently. It was so cool. He promised to take me there again. A sharp pain struck Serena's heart, and a fleeting thought crossed her mind, how much he looks like Manuel. The same gestures, the same expressions. Unbidden tears welled up in her eyes, and with a trembling voice, she said, Sweetheart, come here. You're all dirty. The boy shook his short-cropped head. Mom, wait. I need to finish. I want to show Dad that I can build underground garages too when he comes back. Clumps of dirt flew in all directions again, and Esma glanced disapprovingly at her brother. Mom, he's definitely not normal. He needs to see a doctor. Serena gave her daughter a stern look. He's not normal, and you are, is that it? A smile crept onto the girl's face as she sarcastically replied. Of course, I'm more normal than him because I don't talk nonsense. Dad died, and he was buried. But the little one doesn't believe it was real. He keeps telling me Dad's going to come back. But it doesn't work like that, right? People don't come back from the dead. Serena found herself unable to answer what should have been a simple question. Yet 2 pairs of expectant, innocent eyes were fixed on her. The woman faced a difficult choice. If she sided with Esma, Zacharias' hope would be shattered. But if she took her son's side, it would push Esma further away. She couldn't allow that, especially since Esma had already faced 2 personal tragedies in her short life. First, she had lost her mother, and just a week ago, she had lost her father too. A suffocating wave rose in Serena's throat, and she fought the urge to break down in tears. Forcing a smile, she gently said, Kids, I think it's time for some ice cream, don't you? Zacharias tossed his shovel aside. Mom, get me one with berries. I really like the ice cream with berries. Esma, with less enthusiasm, stated, I like chocolate better. Sensing that the tense moment had passed, Serena cheerfully said, Well then, let's go. Zacharias grabbed his mother's hand on one side, and Esma took the other, and the three of them made their way to the only cafe in the neighborhood that sold all kinds of ice cream. Before they could sit at a table in the popular cafe, Serena had to spend a few minutes washing the dirt off Zacharias' hands and face. He grumbled in displeasure but endured it, knowing that disobedience might cost him his dessert. He timidly asked his mother, "Mom, I'm almost clean. Why are you washing my hands with soap?" She smirked. "You should be grateful I'm cleaning your piglet face without soap." Zacharias let out a heavy sigh. "Mom, just hurry, please." A treacherous thought stabbed at Serena's mind once again. Manuel didn't like washing his hands either. Whenever I sent him to the bathroom, he would laugh and say he'd been a notorious messy kid all his life, and his aunt always struggled with him. Over the past week, Serena had often replayed key moments from their short but almost happy family life. If someone had asked her just a month ago, Serena, what do you need for complete happiness? She could have easily listed at least 5 things. But now, everything that seemed important just days ago had lost all meaning. In fact, her entire life had lost its purpose after her husband's death. Only the children kept her breathing and waking up early each morning. As is often the case, tragedy struck them unexpectedly. For a few days in a row, Manuel had complained of an odd weakness. "Serena, I feel like I'm constantly dizzy and sleepy." Serena had suggested, "Maybe you've caught a cold." Manuel laughed. "It's summer." "What kind of cold?" But Serena stuck to her guess because no other explanations came to mind. She found some antiviral pills in the medicine cabinet and made her husband take them. Half an hour later, Manuel felt better. But the next day, the symptoms returned with twice the intensity. Ignoring her husband's protests, Serena called for an ambulance that evening. The paramedics examined him and gave their diagnosis. "We can't determine what's wrong just by looking. He needs a thorough examination in the hospital." Manuel was outraged. "I don't want to go to the hospital, and I don't have time to lie in a hospital bed. I have an important deal the day after tomorrow. I can't just let go of a project our company's think tank has been working on for nearly a year." With great difficulty, Serena convinced her husband to go to the hospital. "Manuel, they're not going to keep you there unnecessarily. You can go through the tests in a day, and the doctors will let you go. And if needed, we can reschedule the deal. I promise I'll take care of it personally," Serena assured her husband. The paramedic confirmed, "Your wife is right. Hospitals account for every day spent in a bed, and no one's going to hold you there against your will." Serena helped him pack the essentials and saw him off to the ambulance. She wanted to go with him, but Manuel smirked and said, "I'm not on my deathbed for you to come with me. It's better if you stay home and keep an eye on the kids so they don't get into trouble." He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek as he left. It turned out to be his last. The next morning, Serena dropped Zacharias off at daycare and took Esma to school. Mentally, she was already organizing her workday. Serena worked as a marketing specialist at the company her husband ran. She had played a major role in the business's success and took pride in the fact that she had once saved the company from going under. The strategy she had developed helped steer them away from what had seemed like certain bankruptcy. With these pleasant thoughts in mind, Serena settled down at her computer. However, before she could get into the day's work, the phone rang, not her mobile, but the work phone. Lifting the receiver, she automatically answered with her usual phrase. "Hello, how can I help?" A woman's unfamiliar voice responded, "Serena Rivas? This is the First City Hospital calling. Your husband passed away suddenly this morning." Serena let out a nervous laugh. "What kind of sick joke is this? My husband is just undergoing some tests, and he's perfectly healthy. There's no way he could have died suddenly." The stranger's voice remained calm but firm as she repeated, "Your husband, Manuel Rivas, passed away at 8:30 this morning. The doctors were unable to revive him. It would be best if you could come as soon as possible." Even though the voice on the other end was emotionless, Serena realized she was telling the truth. But the shock hadn't fully sunk in yet. For a minute, Serena rushed around her office, searching for her mobile phone, which was lying calmly on her desk the whole time. She then dashed toward the elevator, but it was stuck on another floor, and she felt as though time had frozen along with it. On the way to the hospital, she nearly caused 2 accidents and thought in frustration, I could lose my license for driving like this. She couldn't bear to think about what awaited her at the hospital. Or rather, she was terrified to. Deep down, she still hoped that the morning call had been a mistake or some cruel, misguided prank. Jumping out of the car, Serena rushed straight to the admissions desk. There, a young nurse greeted her with a smile. We don't give information about patients' conditions here. You need to go to the second therapeutic department. Your husband was transferred there yesterday. Serena sprinted down the hallway in the direction the nurse pointed, only to be delayed once again, anxiously waiting for the elevator. When she finally reached the department and introduced herself to the nurse on duty, the woman's eyes widened in shock as she stammered. Go into the doctor's office, they'll explain everything to you. Serena knocked on the door marked with a nameplate, feeling her strength draining away. A man in a white coat caught her arm just as she began to collapse at the entrance. Are you feeling unwell? Please, sit down, he said, guiding her to a chair as her consciousness faded. A hand swiftly waved a cotton ball soaked in ammonia under her nose. Serena inhaled sharply, and the full weight of the horror crashed back upon her. In a barely audible voice, she asked, What happened to my husband? The nurse from the desk explained to the doctor who had revived Serena. Rollo, this is the wife of Manuel Rivas, the patient who passed away this morning in the bathroom. A long, drawn-out I see escaped the doctor's lips. He moved a chair closer to Serena and sat down. I deeply regret having to inform you of this tragic news, but nothing can be done. The exact cause of your husband's death is still being determined. Serena let out a scream. My husband was hardly ever sick. How could a practically healthy man die in your hospital? Her outburst left the doctor visibly flustered. He shot up from his chair, which clattered noisily as it shifted. Hurrying toward his desk, he was interrupted by the standing nurse's timid voice. Rollo, if you're looking for Manuel's chart, I have it at the station. The doctor glared at her in frustration and asked sarcastically, And why is it on your desk? The nurse, looking bewildered, raised her hands defensively. Well, I was attaching his test results. Manuel had tests done yesterday. The girls already performed an ECG and an echo. Forgetting all about the grieving widow in front of him, the doctor began reprimanding the nurse. Alegria, the patient is deceased, and you're talking about tests. You're clearly not all there today. The doctor dramatically twirled his finger near his temple, then muttered quietly, Bring me the chart. I need to write the post-mortem report. He gave Serena a fleeting glance and added, You'll have to wait a bit. You can stay here if you're comfortable, or sit in the hall. Serena understood that the doctor was politely asking her to leave, but she feared she might faint again. I'd rather stay here, she said softly. When the nurse brought the medical chart, Rollo flipped through the documents quickly and exclaimed in surprise, Indeed, a rare case. The EKG shows minor abnormalities and the blood tests. The doctor's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Judging by the blood results, it's possible he had a thrombosis, he said, glancing meaningfully at the widow. When a blood clot dislodges and blocks a major vessel, the outcome is often fatal. It seems that's exactly what happened in your husband's case. Just minutes later, this theory was confirmed by the autopsy results. Serena was handed some papers, and Alegria, the nurse, gently guided her out of the office, holding her arm. Stay strong, dear. Losing loved ones is hard, I know from experience. I lost my husband just a year ago, but he was very sick, Alegria said. With numb lips, Serena whispered, My Manuel rarely complained about his health. He even quit smoking and ran every morning before work. Alegria sighed. The man who was sharing the room with your husband was terrified. Your husband went to wash up and collapsed right there in the bathroom. It's such a shame, so young, only 42. For a man, that's the prime of life. The nurse continued talking about the twists of fate, genuinely trying to comfort the grieving widow, but each word only deepened the pain in Serena's heart. Clutching the discharge papers the doctor had given her, Serena rushed down the corridor, surprising the nurse with her sudden exit. Lost in her bitter thoughts, Serena didn't even notice the ice cream melting away. The children were watching her warily, and once again, she had to muster all her strength to pull herself together. Finding inner balance, she clung to a single thought: Serena, you can't give in to despair, you are needed by your children. For their sake, you must go on living. From a distance, Serena spotted the figure of her mother-in-law, Rosalia Bedoya, standing near the entrance to the building. Rosalia was deeply engrossed in conversation with an elderly woman who lived a floor below them. Esma, with barely hidden glee, whispered, "Oh, the wicked grandma is here. Brainwashing session incoming." Serena quietly scolded her daughter, "Esma, where did you pick up such language? You shouldn't talk about your grandmother that way." Esma's defiant look gave her away entirely. She wasn't even trying to hide her feelings toward her grandmother. "Mom, there's no worse person in the world than our grandma. She only loves herself, and she does nasty things to everyone else." Before Esma could continue her accusatory speech, Zacharias exclaimed joyfully, "Grandma!" He rushed into Rosalia's open arms, and she smothered him with kisses, exclaiming, "My precious grandson! I've been waiting here for a good half hour. Where have you all been?" The boy eagerly shared, "We went to the park and then had ice cream. Mom got me the one with berries." Rosalia shot a disapproving look at her daughter-in-law. "So, you went for a walk? Eating ice cream? And this is just 8 days after your husband's funeral?" The tone and voice of her mother-in-law told Serena exactly what was coming next. But this time, instead of shrinking back as she had so many times before, Serena calmly replied, "I see nothing wrong with us taking a walk and eating ice cream." Rosalia glanced dramatically at her friend, who was hanging on to every word, and then, deliberately loud enough for her to hear, said, "Do you see, Francisca? My daughter-in-law is out here gallivanting in cafes, just days after her husband's death. Such are the morals these days. She didn't even greet me properly." Serena, her irritation now evident, curtly said, "Hello, Rosalia," and made her way toward the steel door of the building. Rosalia quickly rushed up the steps to the porch. "Where do you think you're going? This conversation isn't over." The younger woman turned to face her. "I'm not going to stand here and listen to your insults. You don't even care that the kids are here," Serena said, her voice firm. These words cooled Rosalia's temper somewhat. She let out an awkward giggle and picked up Zacharias in her arms. "The kids will understand their grandma, won't they, Zacharias?" The boy wriggled out of her grasp. "Let me go, Grandma. I'm not a little kid anymore. And Dad said I'm already a real man." Rosalia wiped away a tear. Poor orphan, thinking about his father. Francisca stood nearby with her mouth open, while Serena, her hands trembling with frustration, quickly entered the code to unlock the building door, eager to get inside. Opening the door for her mother-in-law, she hissed, "Rosalia, stop putting on this show. You came here for a reason, didn't you?" Her guest, now sounding pitiful, replied, "Of course, I did. Ever since Manuel died, I don't even want to leave my apartment. Life has lost all its joy. I can't even think about going out and having fun." Serena knew this was another jab at her, but she didn't respond. She was well aware that Rosalia could easily start a scene right there in the building lobby. Serena stayed silent as they rode the elevator up to the 6th floor, but her mother-in-law's chatter didn't cease. "I'm completely lost now, don't know how I'll live without my dear son. My health is in shambles. My heart's acting up, my blood pressure's all over the place. Rosalia didn't forget to complain about her joints, her kidneys, and her nerves, all of which, according to her, were strained from the hardships of life. Her complaints continued even after they stepped off the elevator. To avoid attracting any more attention from the neighbors, Serena quickly unlocked the door to their apartment with the same haste she had shown downstairs, eager to put an end to the spectacle. She gestured for her mother-in-law to enter. "Come in, Rosalia," Serena said. Rosalia took this invitation in her own way and, still in her outdoor shoes, marched straight into the living room and collapsed onto the velvet-upholstered couch. Stretching out her legs in front of her, she sighed, "I'm so tired of everything. I wouldn't say no to a cup of coffee right now." Rosalia looked pointedly at Serena, who, maintaining her composure, turned to her daughter. "Esma, could you please put the kettle on?" Esma shot her grandmother a discontented look but still headed to the kitchen to carry out her mother's request. It seemed like the atmosphere was finally right for a serious conversation, but suddenly, Zacharias started whining. "Mom, my foot hurts," he cried. Serena had to quickly address the cause of his sudden pain. Upon inspection, she found a fresh blister on the boy's heel. She carefully treated the sore spot with a special solution and then applied a bandage. Rosalia couldn't resist commenting on the minor incident. Only a careless mother would put a child in new shoes for a walk. "God forbid that blister gets infected, and then who knows what could happen," she said with a smug tone. Once again, Serena let the remark pass without a response. As the kettle whistled from the kitchen, she kept her composure and said calmly, "I'll go make you that coffee." Rosalia called after her, "Not too strong, if you don't mind. Strong coffee ruins the complexion." Serena winked at her daughter, who was now comfortably settled in front of a small TV in the kitchen. "See? Grandma still cares about her looks, and you were saying she's old," she teased. Esma scoffed. "She's old and mean. She always picked on Dad, and now she's going to start bothering you. I wish she'd leave soon." The harshness of Esma's words stung Serena's ears, but she held back from scolding her. After preparing the coffee for her mother-in-law, she placed the cup along with a dish of éclairs, bought from a nearby pâtisserie, onto a silver tray. When Serena returned to the living room, Rosalia perked up. "Nice coffee, lovely aroma," she remarked. In no time, Rosalia had drained her cup, and the plate of éclairs was empty as well. Finishing the little snack ritual, she asked, "Where did you get these delicious treats?" Serena realized her mother-in-law was more interested in the pastries than anything else. "There's a small bakery nearby. They have all kinds of bread and a wide selection of pastries. The prices are high, but good quality doesn't come cheap." Rosalia sighed dramatically. "Ah, you're living the high life, aren't you, Serena? Silver trays, fancy furniture, and exclusive pastries. Manuel certainly set you up well, but I have a feeling you'll soon have to give up some of these little luxuries." Serena felt her shoulders tense up and couldn't hide her irritation as she asked, "Why's that?" Her mother-in-law ordered, "Sit down." Serena placed the tray on the coffee table but didn't sit next to Rosalia. Instead, she took a chair across from her late husband's mother. Rosalia noticed that her daughter-in-law's behavior emphasized the distance between them. This irritated her, and she decided to put the proud woman in her place. "Serena, you can pout all you want. I'm thick-skinned, you won't faze me. I couldn't care less about your antics. If it weren't for Manuel's death, I wouldn't have come to see you for another 100 years. But now, I believe it's time for the truth." Serena raised her eyebrows in surprise. "I don't understand what you mean." Rosalia shifted uncomfortably on the plush sofa. "What's so unclear?" "I think it's the perfect time to address the pressing issues that concern both of us." Serena remained silent, her calmness infuriating Rosalia. From the very first day, she had disliked this arrogant girl who had already disrupted her plans once 7 years ago. But she couldn't afford to falter again, so she decided to assert her authority. Rosalia had been preparing for this conversation from the day she learned of her son's death. She remembered receiving a tearful call from Serena. Rosalia, Manuel has died. He fell ill yesterday. I called an ambulance, and today he's gone. It's a nightmare. The news had initially stunned Rosalia. For several hours, she was in a daze, but then she gathered herself. The first thought that crossed her mind was about the inheritance. I must not let this pretender claim everything my son worked for. Despite the overwhelming sorrow, Rosalia maintained her composure. She actively took charge of organizing her son's funeral. With Serena walking around like a ghost, no one stopped her from acting as she saw fit. The farewell to the head of the company took place in the office's assembly hall. People poured in endlessly to express their condolences to the grieving family. As expected, the mother shed the appropriate tears and, with a trembling voice, thanked those who showed compassion for her misfortune. She cried at the cemetery, listening to heartfelt remarks from colleagues and friends about the deceased. Only at the restaurant, where the closest family members gathered after the burial, did Rosalia relax a little. She listened intently to the conversations at the table, trying to remember any useful information. During a break in the memorial meal, she accidentally ran into the accountant in the women's restroom. After a couple of shots of whiskey, the accountant was more than willing to talk. From this woman, Rosalia learned about her late son's assets. However, the accountant sagely remarked while washing her hands after leaving the stall. Now the main share package will go to Serena, since by law she is the primary heir. Rosalia involuntarily exclaimed, "But isn't the mother also a direct heir?" The accountant looked taken aback. "You know, I'm not very strong in legal matters, but I think the biological mother should also be among the primary heirs. However, it all depends on the will. That document expresses the deceased's last wishes. I may be mistaken, but as far as I know, Manuel did not make a will." Rosalia decided to extract as much information as she could from the loquacious accountant. "You know even such details?" The woman hesitated slightly. "Manuel and I weren't exactly friends, but we never kept secrets from each other." Catching the astonished look from her companion, the deceased's colleague continued, "Manuel and my husband studied together, and after graduation, they worked at the same organization for a couple of years. Then our families became friends when Manuel married Joaquina Balin. I knew your son's first wife well. You could say I introduced them." The elderly woman was surprised. "Oh, really?" The newly revealed information struck her heart like a dagger, and Rosalia rushed out of the restroom. The mention of her son's first wife brought back many painful memories, as she had caused her a great deal of trouble in the past. Any reminder of Joaquina brought the older woman immense anguish. Now, talking to Serena, she felt a strong sense of emotional discomfort. Yet the desire to resolve the inheritance issue amicably and in her favor forced her to endure this torment. She looked at her daughter-in-law sitting across from her and broke the prolonged silence. "I would like for us to settle this without wars and unnecessary quarrels." Serena guessed where her mother-in-law was headed and replied with a smirk, "Rosalia, I think it's still too early to discuss inheritance matters. As the saying goes, there's a time for everything." The guest struggled to rise. "Let it be so. But I want to warn you that I will defend my legal rights by any means available." The mother-in-law emphasized her last phrase, and Serena involuntarily shivered. It sounded so ominous. The young hostess wanted to wrap up the unpleasant conversation quickly. She stood up and said cheerfully, "You must be in a hurry? I'll walk you out, Rosalia." The mother-in-law retorted sarcastically, "No need to worry, I can find my way to the door myself, since this is my son's apartment. By the way, you didn't forget that tomorrow marks 9 days, did you?" The daughter-in-law immediately replied, "No, I didn't forget. I plan to take the kids to the cemetery in the morning. If you'd like, you can join us." Rosalia didn't want to leave just yet. She was looking for another opportunity to pick a fight, and one presented itself. With a glint in her eyes, she asked pointedly, "So where do you plan to observe this occasion?" Serena was taken aback. "Isn't it customary to just remember the deceased quietly? As far as I know, it's sufficient to commemorate them in a family setting." The mother-in-law exclaimed gleefully, "I knew it. You want to save even on the memorials, and yet Manuel gave you everything. He practically brought you into society, and this is such ingratitude." The final scene was emotionally charged and vivid, so Rosalia left the visit satisfied. She opened the front door herself and strutted toward the elevator, tossing back over her shoulder, "You'll come pick me up tomorrow. Although I'm not feeling well, I want to visit my son's grave." Serena slammed the door shut and sighed in relief. Behind her, she heard Esma's stealthy footsteps. "Finally, that hellish grandma is gone. Mom, I thought she'd sit here until nightfall." Serena wanted to remind her daughter that one must respect their elders and that grandmothers wish everyone well. But she realized that her mother-in-law's actions couldn't be measured by ordinary moral standards. After the unwanted guest left, the atmosphere in the house lightened. Serena started preparing dinner, and Esma volunteered to help. To avoid being lonely, Zacharias also made his way to the kitchen, bringing along his toy car collection. The boy settled in the middle of the room and loudly annoyed his sister with the sounds of racing cars. Several times, Serena asked him, "Zacharias, you're bothering us. The kitchen isn't the best place to play. Why don't you go to your room?" The little boy confessed earnestly, "It's scary in there." His mother became alert. "There's no one there. What are you afraid of?" The boy shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know, but it's scary." Esma suggested, "Mom, maybe Dad is coming to see Zacharias? They say that when someone dies, their soul stays in the house where they lived. I read on the internet that the deceased visit the living." Serena was surprised by her 9-year-old daughter's knowledge of superstitions. She tried to dispel such myths. "That's just a product of the imagination of sensitive people. When a loved one dies, their relatives go through stress, and that's when all sorts of visions occur." Esma thoughtfully asked, "Are dreams also because of stress?" Serena put down the knife she was using to chop vegetables and hugged her daughter tightly. "Did you dream of Dad?" "Yes, I saw him in a dream yesterday. He was smiling and telling me something, but I didn't remember it. Zacharias said he also saw Dad." The woman held her daughter even closer. "Dad loved you very much, and if you see him in your dreams, you shouldn't be scared. He wouldn't do anything bad to either you or Zacharias." Esma nodded in agreement. "Okay, Mom, I'll try not to be afraid." "Mom, have you seen Dad in a dream?" The woman sighed and said sadly, "No, he hasn't appeared in my dreams yet." After dinner, they watched an old comedy on television. When it was time to go to bed, Esma quietly asked, "Mom, can I sleep with you tonight?" Zacharias jumped up immediately. "Mom, I want to sleep with you too. I'm scared alone." To convince her, the boy started to whimper, and Serena had to give in to her children's requests, especially since the bed in the master bedroom was spacious enough to comfortably accommodate everyone who wanted to join. The children were sweetly snoring beside her, but Serena couldn't fall asleep. She kept going over in her mind everything that would never return. In her youth, Serena often imagined meeting that one special man with whom she would spend her entire life. She was raised in a family where kindness and mutual understanding were held above all else. From a young age, her parents instilled in their only daughter such valuable qualities as hard work and honesty. By the age of 5, Serena understood that she was responsible for her own actions, and she accepted punishment with humility. Of course, her father and mother never sent her to the corner or, even more so, used a belt as a form of discipline. They never raised their voices at her, but they knew how to influence her with words. For example, Serena feared hearing from her father, "Yes, daughter, you have not lived up to my expectations. I thought I could rely on you, but you..." Her mother punished disobedience with silence. She simply ignored Serena, as if she didn't exist at all. And seeking forgiveness from her mother was much harder than from her father. Perhaps for many modern parents, such a method of upbringing might seem outdated, but Serena always recalled her parents with warmth, as they not only provided her with the right life values but also a good education. After finishing school, Serena initially enrolled in a college as she didn't pass the entrance exam for the university. For several days, she mourned her first failure, while her father comforted her, saying, "I also started my journey into adulthood from a technical college. It's useful, at least because you get to understand what ordinary workers deal with." Serena took her father's advice to heart and didn't give up her studies at the college. After graduating from the secondary educational institution, she was accepted into university. With a degree in marketing and economics, the young woman easily found a job at a large company. An industrious and disciplined employee, she earned the respect of her colleagues from her first days on the job. Within a year and a half, she was appointed head of her department. Her early career successes delighted Serena but saddened her parents, whom she visited every week. During one of those visits, her mother sadly remarked, "Serena, you've turned 26. It's time to think about starting a family." Serena knew well that a huge gap existed in her personal life. But all her previous suitors, whom she had turned down, had found wives, and starting a new relationship at her age was very challenging. However, she never showed that this topic was painful for her. To her mother, she replied cheerfully, "Mom, you yourself said that you can't rush destiny. It means my time hasn't come yet. By the time it comes, your father and I will be at the cemetery," her mother said. "We so want to have grandchildren to spoil." Such conversations became more frequent, and Serena began to visit her family less often to spare herself from discussions on the sensitive topic. Once, she confided to Elisa, with whom she had a friendly relationship. "Elisa, it seems I'm starting to develop an old maid complex." Elisa chuckled, "You're not the only one. I sometimes feel so lonely in this apartment that I want to howl. Believe me, a dizzying career is nothing compared to simple feminine happiness. For any normal woman, the most important thing is a husband and children." Her friend's confession awakened a desire in Serena's heart to find that uncomplicated happiness. But the hitch was that she hadn't found a willing volunteer to build that happiness with her. Serena had started to think about meeting someone through third parties, but fate intervened. One autumn evening, she was aimlessly wandering through the city and, on a whim, turned into a park that was dark. Couples were nestled on benches, kissing, and Serena mentally asked herself, "Why did I come here?" Then she answered herself, "Probably looking for trouble." Quickening her pace, she headed towards the park exit. But just as she was passing a bench near the exit, a male voice stopped her. "Hey, don't run away. Stay for just a minute." It was so unexpected that Serena froze in place. It was impossible to see the owner of the pleasant baritone in the darkness, who, taking advantage of her momentary confusion, asked, "Why are people so indifferent?" Judging by the voice, the stranger was quite tipsy. Since her father didn't indulge in alcohol, Serena had developed a negative attitude towards drinking people from a young age. So, she replied rather sharply, "You should drink less, and then people would be more responsive." She continued on her way, but the same voice caught up to her. "Sometimes grief can break even the strongest people. I used to think I was Superman, but then trouble came, and I bent." That was a cry from the heart, and Serena couldn't just walk past. Although she felt a bit uneasy, she returned. Very quietly, she said, "I don't think there's any trouble that should be drowned in alcohol." The man sighed dramatically. "How naive you are, sweet creature. God forbid you ever experience what I've had to endure." There was not a trace of deceit or pretense in the stranger's voice, and this sincerity touched Serena's heart. She sat on the edge of the park bench and cautiously looked at the man sitting at the other end. "If you want to share your grief with someone, I'm ready to listen." The man smirked. "Maybe you're kind-hearted. Once again, thank you for not just passing by. I usually don't pour my heart out into strangers' jackets, but today I feel absolutely terrible. I don't even want to go home." Serena hesitantly replied, "But surely someone is waiting for you at home, worried about you?" The stranger waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, please. No one is worried about me. My mother is constantly nagging me, her only interest is money. And Esma, she's my little daughter. She doesn't understand how ruthless this world can be. Serena thought that if this unfortunate man had a child, it meant he was married. So her next question was about his spouse. And what about your wife? You should tell her about your troubles, she'll understand you. Suddenly, the man choked up. Wife? I don't have a wife anymore. She died 3 months ago, and now my daughter and I are all alone. Time passes, but I can't get used to the idea that Joaquina is gone. I see her in every woman I meet. I know life goes on, but I can't shake off this obsession. So, I drown my sorrows in wine. Excuse me, whiskey. Serena realized that her clumsy advice had touched a raw nerve. She started to apologize, but only made the situation worse. The widower pulled out a half-empty bottle, greedily taking swigs from it. Serena watched as he drank straight from the neck in large gulps, and with every passing moment, her fear intensified. A treacherous thought flickered through her mind. What if this unstable man gets drunk and starts to make advances? As if reading her mind, the man said, "Don't worry, I don't have a habit of hitting on strangers. Thank you for listening to my sentimental ramblings, but I won't keep you any longer." Serena advised him, "You should go home too." The man shook his head. "No, I'd rather wait here. I don't want to scare my daughter with my appearance. And if my mother sees me like this, it'll be the end for me." He took another impressive swig and attempted to stand up, but was thrown off balance. Serena barely managed to catch him with her shoulder. "Try to stay on your feet," she said. The man thanked her. "Thank you for not letting me fall." A swarm of different thoughts buzzed in her head. I should leave him and run home. But then the inevitable question arose, what will happen to him if I abandon him? Despite the impenetrable darkness, Serena could see that the widower was well dressed, his speech was articulate, and she noticed expensive watches with a glowing dial on his right wrist. Unsure of herself, the girl suggested, "I'll walk you home. Can you tell me your address?" He named the street and the house, and she replied, disappointed, "If I'm not mistaken, that's somewhere out of town? But the buses aren't running now. Don't worry about me. I'll just wait on the bench until morning." Serena already felt responsible for this man. She couldn't leave him alone in the dark park with his troubles. "You can spend the night at my place. I rent an apartment nearby. Unfortunately, I can only offer you a worn-out folding bed." The man exclaimed loudly, "Yes, I can even sleep on the floor." That memorable night, Serena couldn't fall asleep at all. The guest tossed and turned on the old folding bed, which creaked with every movement. The powerful sound of the man's snoring added to the auditory cacophony. It was only near dawn, when the first light of day broke outside the window, that she fell into a restless slumber. Serena heard her overnight guest get up in the morning. She also jumped up from the couch where she had spent the sleepless night. "I'll make you some coffee." The man grimaced. "Don't worry about it. I've already caused you enough trouble." He hurried to the hallway, and soon the front door slammed shut. Serena thought sadly, even drunken men don't bite. It looks like it's time to write me off. At work, she told Elisa about the night encounter, and her friend scolded her. "A guy spent the night in your apartment, and you didn't even ask for his name?" Serena timidly replied, "Elisa, he was really drunk. Why would I want a guy like that?" Her friend fluttered her heavily made-up eyelashes. "Are you really this clueless, or are you just pretending? Just so you know, drunkenness is a temporary state. Besides, plenty of successful people struggle with this bad habit, and it's quite possible your stranger holds a high position or is a well-known businessman." Serena didn't pay much attention to her friend's words, thinking that a businessperson would have a zero chance of choosing a park bench to rest on. Days went by, and she began to forget about her meeting with the widower. One autumn day, the director gathered all the department heads in his office. "Friends, the city administration is interested in developing business in our region, but it's known that every field has its own problems. To address this, the authorities have decided to hold a sort of roundtable discussion. Such events are useful because they allow for the exchange of experiences and the sharing of useful insights. In short, you need to delegate a representative from our company to this summit. The boss scanned everyone present with an authoritative gaze and unexpectedly fixed his eyes on Serena. Serena, I'm confident you will handle this mission. A chorus of joyful voices supported the boss. That's right. She's the best candidate. Serena is more worthy than anyone else. The girl didn't dare to object. For 2 days, she prepared the text for her speech and appeared in the conference hall of the business center at the appointed hour. To her surprise, she saw the stranger who had spent the night at her apartment in the summer sitting nearby. Serena thought the man had long forgotten her, but during the break, he called her aside. I recognized you right away. Even if it's late, I want to apologize for my outrageous behavior. She forced a smile. Yes, I've long forgotten. But tell me, how have you been? They started chatting, and after the event, at the man's suggestion, they went to grab a bite at a cafe. That's where their acquaintance began. Manuel avoided discussing the topic that was still painful for him. He only briefly recounted the tragedy that had shattered his family life. Joaquina, my wife, was an experienced driver. For a time, she even worked as a taxi driver, so it remains a mystery to me how she didn't notice that the car was malfunctioning. The brakes failed, and the car crashed into another vehicle at high speed. It's a good thing she didn't take our daughter with her. Serena expressed her sympathy to the man but didn't ask any probing questions. They started seeing each other, but there were no hints of closeness for a long time. Their interactions were limited to walks and brief get-togethers at inexpensive cafes. One evening during one of their outings, Manuel confessed, "My wife's death knocked me completely off course, and I forgot all about work. Now my firm is on the brink of bankruptcy. But I've come to terms with the idea that I'll have to look for another place in the sun." His voice carried no despair, which surprised Serena. "Manuel, you speak as if you know where that place is." He smiled broadly. "Of course, I do. My beloved Aunt Clarissa lives there. It's a small provincial town where everything is quiet and peaceful. But you have your mother nearby. Why would you want to go to your aunt's?" The smile vanished from the man's face. "My relationship with my mother is very complicated, even difficult." Serena realized that this topic was also unpleasant for Manuel. They walked in silence for a while, and then, unexpectedly for herself, Serena said, "I think I can help you avoid bankruptcy. I'm not entirely sure, but we can give it a try." Manuel didn't ask for details, he simply replied, "I'm ready to grab at any straw right now, so I accept your offer." Serena had to resign from her previous job, which displeased her boss. But even then, she understood that there was something more binding her to Manuel than just a business relationship. In less than 6 months, Serena turned Manuel Rivas's company around. Manuel appointed her as his deputy, and a few months later, they got married, much to Rosalia's great displeasure. She immediately took a strong dislike to her new daughter-in-law and didn't hesitate to use the most colorful epithets against her. "The earth hasn't even cooled on my wife's grave, and he brings home another nobody. There are so many worthy women around, and my son is drawn to the provinces." Serena found it unpleasant to listen to such remarks, but she patiently endured her mother-in-law's barbs, while with Esma, she found complete understanding from day one. The little girl didn't remember her biological mother and was drawn to Serena. Manuel couldn't have been happier watching them together. He confessed to his wife, "I just can't believe I have a family again. Thank you for everything. You've warmed me, and you've replaced my daughter's mother." A year later, their family welcomed Zacharias. Manuel felt happy and wasn't shy about expressing it. "Serena, you brought me back to life. I will always be grateful to you for that. If it hadn't been for that damned blood clot, they probably would have lived together into old age, but cruel fate had other plans." Serena gently touched her cheek, recalling the last kiss from her dearly beloved husband. After a sleepless night, Serena had a pounding headache and decided to linger in bed a little longer. The young widow could afford some indulgence since she had taken 2 weeks off due to her husband's death. But before she could fall back into the arms of Morpheus, there was a persistent knock at the door. She jumped out of bed, fearing that an early visitor would wake the children. "It's probably my mother-in-law who has come barging in at the crack of dawn. She just can't help herself. She must be a thorn in my side." Serena opened the door and froze. A modestly dressed woman stood on the doorstep with a shy smile on her face. "Serena, don't you recognize me? I'm Manuel's aunt." The young hostess rushed to hug her guest. "Clarissa, I'm so glad you came. We were just planning to go to the cemetery today since it's the 9th day." The late husband's relative sighed sadly and then walked into the hallway. "I couldn't make it to the funeral. As soon as I heard about Manuel's death, I lost my senses. I spent an entire week in the hospital on 4 drips. After all, I practically raised him." Serena always found the details of her late husband's childhood to be a mystery. She wanted to know more about that period, but both Manuel and his aunt had always avoided open conversations about it. However, after Manuel's death, all taboos had essentially been lifted, yet she felt shy to start asking her guest right away and simply offered politely, "You must be hungry from the journey?" The woman smiled shyly again. "A little. I barely managed to recover from the shock. I cried for days. I kept thinking about Manuel. Why did this happen to him? What did he do to deserve it?" Serena said quietly, "Clarissa, many would like to know the answer to that question. I ask myself that often too." Serena fed her guest and served her coffee, which her mother-in-law had liked the day before. Clarissa also appreciated the drink. "This is the first time in my life I've had such delicious coffee. Serena, tell me, how did it all happen?" For the umpteenth time in recent days, the widow recounted the sudden death of her husband. Clarissa listened to her, sobbing. "Now I'm completely alone. I don't know how to cope with this grief." In a surge of emotion, the young hostess suggested, "Please come to visit us more often, or you could even move in with us. It's easier to bear grief together." Clarissa smiled through her tears. "Serena, you're so kind. Manuel told me that there isn't another woman as compassionate as you in the world. I would gladly accept your offer, but I can't." Serena was surprised. "Why not? Nothing is stopping you from coming." Clarissa looked away. "There are reasons." Serena tactfully remained silent. Then the children woke up, and everything in the house started to whirl around. It turned out that in almost 7 years of married life, Serena had only seen her husband's aunt twice. She attended their wedding, if one could call their modest gathering with friends a wedding. Then the whole family made a return visit when little Zacharias turned 9 months old. Manuel took her and the kids to his aunt's place and returned to the city by himself. The young mother enjoyed a month of rest while the caring Clarissa happily took care of the children. Serena could talk to her husband's relative about absolutely anything. The aunt loved to tell her about the childhood antics of her favorite nephew. She did not hide the fact that there was no one closer to her than Manuel. But as soon as Serena mentioned her mother-in-law's name, Clarissa would immediately fall silent. Once, she confessed, "Rosalia and I are at odds. I still don't understand what she saw in my brother Fidel. She nearly drove him to the grave. Luckily, he came to his senses in time. When they divorced, Fidel wanted to take their son, but his new wife was against it. Then Rosalia started to miss having a man around. I don't want to speak ill of anyone, but the guy turned out to be unwanted by anyone. So I took him in. God didn't bless me with my own children, and I raised Manuel like my own son." When they were leaving for home, Clarissa cried, "Come visit me more often, don't forget." Serena also cried and promised to visit the kind woman. Subsequently, she considered going to her husband's aunt several times, but urgent matters kept coming up, and the trip was postponed. Since the family secret remained undisclosed, Serena repeatedly tried to talk to her husband about it. But each time, Manuel evaded a direct answer. "Serena, I don't want to dig into my past. There are things that I'd rather not remember." Serena stopped all attempts. She just noticed during her frequent visits to her mother-in-law how an electric charge would sometimes pass between her and her son. However, Rosalia was not embarrassed by her son's dislike of her. She usually appeared unannounced and immediately began to issue valuable instructions from the doorstep. "Manuel, you could find your mother a place to live closer so that I wouldn't have to travel to you by bus." Her son replied briefly, "I don't see an urgent need for that right now." Rosalia repeatedly tried to influence her son through his wife. "Serena, why don't you suggest to your husband that he shouldn't speak so rudely to his mother?" Once, the young woman tried to fish for a response. "Manuel, your mom must be feeling very lonely? If she lived closer, she could visit us more often." Her husband grimaced. "I'm not going to change anything. I'm perfectly fine with things as they are. Let's not bring this up again, okay?" She had to accept her husband's condition. "As you say." This conversation took place in the spring, shortly before Manuel's death, when his mother was bedridden with bronchitis. Serena secretly visited his sick mother, but her mother-in-law did not appreciate her concern. She continued to insult her daughter-in-law and once remarked, "Don't worry, every patience has its limits. There will come a day when my son will bitterly regret how he treated his own mother. I'll take him to court, and they will make him provide me with a decent old age." Serena tried to argue with her mother-in-law. "Rosalia, you're not old at all. You're only 63. And as far as I know, Manuel transfers a decent amount to your account every month." The mother-in-law screamed, "Don't you count my money. He's my son and is obligated to support me. And anyway, I can pack my things and move in with you tomorrow. And there's nothing you can do about it." The prospect of her mother-in-law moving in always frightened Serena. She understood that if that happened, their family would fall apart. It was comforting to think that Manuel would never allow that. And now that her husband was gone, her mother-in-law's dreams would not come true. Following tradition, she and Clarissa first went to the temple to pray and light candles. Then Serena warned her relative, "Clarissa, we'll have to pick up Rosalia. I promised her." The guest replied calmly, "If we have to, let's go." After a brief pause, Clarissa added with a smirk, "Don't worry, I'll be as quiet as a fish. Even if Rosalia decides to throw a tantrum, she won't succeed." Contrary to the widow's fears, everything went smoothly. The relatives exchanged standard greetings and remained silent the entire way to the cemetery. Surprisingly, the children behaved calmly. Even Zacharias didn't annoy them with his endless why questions. After the cemetery, Serena suggested stopping for lunch at a restaurant, but her mother-in-law flatly refused. "I don't need charity. Everything with you is so unrefined. You think you can get away with a restaurant? At home, we're supposed to set a memorial table, and you're too lazy to cook." Clarissa couldn't hold back. "Rosalia, how can you be so shameless? On a day like this?" The mother-in-law shot a spiteful glance at her sister-in-law. "Clarissa, you'd better be quiet. I don't understand why you showed up, huh? Are you hoping for a piece of the inheritance? Just know, you won't get anything. Because you're nobody and have no name." Suddenly, Esma spoke up. "Grandma Rosalia, if you're going to argue, I'll be upset with you." The granddaughter's threat had an effect, and the mother-in-law calmed down. "Don't be upset with Grandma, Esma." Serena wanted to quickly drop off the troublemaker, so she increased her speed. But when they arrived at the destination, Rosalia unexpectedly declared, "We should have stopped at the restaurant after all. I didn't prepare anything today." Clarissa let out her accumulated irritation. "Rosalia, there's a store around the corner. Go buy yourself something to eat." The aunt slammed the door shut and commanded loudly, "Let's go, Serena." The kids are hungry, it's time to feed them. Clarissa's bold move impressed not only Serena but also Esma. The girl squeaked with delight. "Grandma Clarissa, you're amazing." Mom is too scared to say a word to Rosalia. Clarissa stayed with them for only 3 days and began to pack up to go home. Serena urged her to stay. "Clarissa, please stay a few more days. You came like a ray of sunshine and are leaving again." The woman sadly remarked, "I also feel lighter in my heart. I would gladly stay longer, but my house is left to its own devices. I thought I'd just run there and back, but it turned into almost a week." Serena sensed that her relative was holding something back but didn't want to push her. Clarissa packed her suitcase and sat down on a chair. "Well, I'll be on my way tomorrow." "Serena, I didn't come here just for nothing. I came on a mission. To be precise, I came to fulfill Manuel's request." The widow was surprised. "Why didn't you say so right away? What did Manuel ask you for?" The relative handed her a thin folder. "I was thinking about when it would be convenient for you to receive this document. It's Manuel's will. He stopped by my place for a few hours in the spring and asked me to hide the document. He didn't want anyone to know about the will, not even his mother, so he went to our local notary." Serena felt a shiver run through her. "Clarissa, believe me, I care the least about the inheritance right now. I've lost the love of my life, and everything else is trivial to me." Clarissa said sternly, "You have children, don't forget about them. At first, I didn't want to give you the will, but then I thought, what if something happens to me? Rosalia is very selfish, she'll drag you through the courts, and it's not guaranteed she won't want to leave you with nothing. There's nothing sacred to her. In her youth, she behaved so badly that the earth shook. But, as usual, Fidel, my brother, was the last to know about her infidelities," Clarissa sobbed. "He almost went to the other world from the shame. I saved him. He screamed that he didn't want to live like that. I took him to heal with various folk remedies for a year, thank God he recovered. Then he met a woman who helped him return to a normal life. The woman is good, it's just that she didn't want to take Manuel in, and he was unnecessary to his own mother. She could never settle her life, she was married 3 times. Clarissa sighed, finishing her story. "That's the story. Now you understand why Manuel was so cold towards his own mother?" But Rosalia didn't want to admit her guilt, she considered herself right. "She scolded me for turning her son against his own mother." Serena was stunned by her relative's story. She took the will and said thoughtfully, "I never thought Rosalia was like that." Clarissa suggested, "She's unscrupulous, and you should keep your distance from her. I have a suspicion that Joaquina didn't die without her involvement." Serena gasped in horror. "What? You can't be serious." "I'm telling it as it is. Joaquina was kind to the mother-in-law, and she was running things in their house. And shortly before her death, neighbors saw that witch going to the garage where Joaquina's car was. But when the investigator questioned her, she said she was going to get jars for preserves. He believed her, but I know Rosalia's vile nature. It's for sure that the accident happened with her involvement. So, just to be safe, keep your distance from your mother-in-law. She's the kind of person who won't stop at anything. She'd step over you and keep going." Serena hid her husband's will away. Clarissa's story made her less benevolent towards her mother-in-law. When Rosalia came over for another visit, she tried not to leave her alone. Rosalia didn't like the excessive attention from her daughter-in-law, and one day she asked, "Serena, why are you hovering around me? Are you afraid I'll put poison in your soup?" Looking her straight in the eyes, the young woman confessed, "I won't hide it, I'm really afraid of you." Rosalia twirled her finger at her temple and concluded, "Definitely not normal. You should see a doctor if you're imagining all sorts of nonsense. That's called paranoia. I'll leave you, with a daughter-in-law like you, I'd go crazy myself." For several months, her mother-in-law didn't come to visit. Serena periodically called her to check on her health, and Rosalia replied in her usual manner, I'm not dead yet, so there's no need to worry. If Serena offered her help, she would scream into the receiver. Don't try to placate me. I've calculated all your moves in advance. I know you and Clarissa have made a plan. You want to push me to the grave before my time. But you won't succeed. I'll get my way, and you'll end up with nothing. Of course, with such an attitude, Serena couldn't talk to her mother-in-law about the will, even though she knew its contents by heart. The late husband had left his business, apartment, and car to his wife and children. To the aunt who raised him, he bequeathed a small but cozy house in the dacha village where they loved to spend weekends as a family. He also didn't forget his mother, who hadn't cared much for him. According to the will, Rosalia received a monthly allowance. The period of estrangement lasted until the end of winter. Serena would call her mother-in-law, and she would respond rudely to her concern. But one day, Rosalia called and began to apologize for her behavior. Serena, don't hold a grudge against me. I feel bad being alone, and that's why I'm so irritable. I miss my grandchildren so much. Can I come visit you? The daughter-in-law was even happy. Of course, come. The kids are asking me why Grandma hasn't come to visit. Zacharias is especially worried. Her mother-in-law's voice trembled. Zacharias. He's so kind, just like Manuel. Manuel used to give his toys to the kids in the yard when he was a child and shared everything at school. Serena thought, how does she know such details if she didn't raise her son? She didn't voice this thought because, on a human level, she felt sorry for her mother-in-law. She hadn't forgotten Clarissa's warning, of course, but considered it unfounded. Older people tend to imagine all sorts of things, and Clarissa had convinced herself that Rosalia was involved in Esma's mother's death. That same evening, Rosalia delighted them with her visit. She bought sweets for the children and spent the entire evening with her grandchildren. When it was time for the kids to go to bed, she shyly asked, Serena, may I read Zacharias a bedtime story? Esma chimed in with her significant contribution. Grandma, I may be almost grown up, but I still love fairy tales. Serena didn't know whether to be happy or worried about this change. After putting the children to bed, they spent a long time in the kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about life. Already past midnight, Rosalia glanced at the clock. Oh, I've stayed too long. I need to hurry, or I'll miss the last bus. Serena's heart opened wide. Rosalia, please stay. There's plenty of room for everyone. Where will you go at night? It was as if her mother-in-law had been waiting for this tempting offer, but she hesitated a little for show. I don't want to impose on you. I often wake up at night. I'll be a bother. The daughter-in-law replied with a smile. We sleep very soundly. Serena prepared a bed for her mother-in-law in the room that had once served as her husband's office. Rosalia was pleased with her daughter-in-law's hospitality and, when saying goodbye in the morning, asked, May I come visit you again? Of course. A week later, Rosalia visited them again and stayed the night. They drank coffee in the kitchen until midnight, discussing various pressing topics. During their heartfelt conversation, the mother-in-law casually asked, Serena, have you been to the notary yet? The woman replied without hesitation. Not yet. I plan to go next week. It's time to deal with the inheritance. Malicious sparks flickered in the elderly woman's eyes and then quickly extinguished. But on the day the widow planned to visit the notary, Zacharias complained of a sore throat. Serena put her hand on her son's forehead and felt his fever. Oh, son, it seems you're sick. The worried mother rushed around the apartment, unsure how to handle the situation. Esma came to the rescue. Mom, why are you stressing out? Call Grandma, she'll be happy to rush over for a free lunch. Serena was indignant at her adopted daughter's remarks. Esma, you sound like a street thug. The girl retorted. I'm taking a page from Grandma's book. She can spin any tale. Time was running out, and a decision had to be made. Serena dialed the familiar number. Rosalia, Zacharias is sick. He has a fever, and I just happened to have an appointment with the notary today. Could you help me out? Could you sit with him for a couple of hours?" Her mother-in-law was delighted by the request. "Serena, what questions could there be? I'll come right away. Just call the doctor to come to the house." Serena informed her work that she would be late and then called the children's clinic. Soon, her mother-in-law arrived and rushed to her grandson. "Zacharias, how did you get sick?" "It's all that ice cream. Your mother spoils you, forgetting that cold desserts are dangerous." The daughter-in-law smiled as she listened to her mother-in-law's lamentations. At one point, she caught herself thinking that after so many years of misunderstanding, their relationship was starting to improve. But she needed to hurry to the notary, and with regret, Serena said, "All right, Rosalia, I have to run, but call me if you need anything. The pediatrician should be here soon. Tell him everything about Zacharias' illness." Serena dashed out of the apartment, forgetting the prepared documents on the nightstand. A minute later, Rosalia stepped into the hallway to check if the door was locked. Seeing the folder with the documents, she froze but quickly collected herself. The elderly woman, with the enthusiasm of a hunter, rummaged through the folder until she stumbled upon the will. She began to read the document greedily, and as she familiarized herself with its contents, she let out indignant exclamations. "So that's what it is. So, my son, you decided to take such a cruel revenge on your mother? You wrote everything down for that good-for-nothing and didn't forget your aunt. But you abandoned your mother?" Zacharias heard his grandmother's cries and became worried. "Grandma, are you sick too?" Rosalia shouted from the hallway. "Yes, grandson, your grandmother is very unwell," the boy wisely observed. "When the doctor comes, I'll ask him to treat you too." Only in the notary's office did Serena realize that she had left the main document at home. She asked the lawyer, "Excuse me, but it turns out that I forgot the will at home in my haste. I'll quickly go back there and come right back." The notary, a young and rather handsome guy, sighed. "Can you really be so careless about serious matters like inheritance? I can't promise anything, but if there's time left, I will see you." Serena raced home, praying to the Almighty that her mother-in-law hadn't noticed the folder she had left behind. But, as it turned out, she hadn't just left behind important documents, she had also forgotten to lock the apartment door. Cautiously sneaking into the hallway, Serena immediately rushed to the nightstand. Seeing the folder in its place, she let out a sigh of relief. She was just about to dash out the door when she was stopped by her mother-in-law's lively voice. Rosalia was in the kitchen, talking to someone on her mobile phone. Serena held her breath and heard, "Marcella, you can't imagine how I feel right now. It's not proper to speak ill of the dead, but my son has really taken it out on me. Of course, I won't let this go. No, I probably won't achieve much in court. I'll act differently. I've gotten rid of one, and I can remove this one too. Don't worry, I've already lulled her vigilance. I'll tell you more, I've even ingratiated myself with her. Right now, as a decent grandmother, I'm sitting with my sick grandson. Marcella, these things shouldn't be discussed over the phone, but I know ways to get rid of that detestable daughter-in-law without any consequences for myself. Are you kidding? At my age, to get my hands dirty? That would be, at the very least, undignified. There's a way to make her wither away on her own." The folder slipped from Serena's hands and thudded onto the floor. At that moment, Rosalia burst out of the kitchen, her face twisted in fear. "Serena? Why did you come back?" The young woman picked up the folder from the floor. "I forgot the documents. But, as I can see, you've already had a chance to familiarize yourself with the will." Rosalia's face went from deathly pale to flushed with anger. Feeling defeated, the elderly woman launched an attack. "I didn't know, dear daughter-in-law, that you suffer from the bad habit of eavesdropping. It's not good." Serena didn't hesitate. "I'm in my own home, and I'd appreciate it if you would leave the apartment quickly." Her mother-in-law theatrically rolled her eyes, but this scene didn't have the desired effect on Serena. Overcome with rage, she bombarded her mother-in-law with accusations. "I came to you with all my heart, and you decided to send me to the other side. Clarissa told me that there is nothing sacred to you, and I didn't believe it. I even scolded Manuel for treating you poorly. But now I understand why he acted that way." Rosalia pressed herself against the wall, stammering, "You will regret kicking me out." Serena countered, "Watch out that you don't end up regretting it. Your hand didn't tremble when you plotted revenge against Joaquina. You didn't think about your granddaughter being left an orphan. Just know that I won't let this go. You will answer for all your deeds." Rosalia's eyes widened, and in a frenzy, she screamed, "You'll never be believed, you worthless hag. I'll take away your parental rights because you're an unfit mother." It's unclear how this confrontation would have ended had the pediatrician not appeared on the landing. She looked carefully at the grandmother, then at the mother. "Is this the Rivas family?" Serena nodded. "Yes, I called you." By the time the doctor examined the child, Rosalia had managed to leave the apartment. Serena hoped that with her mother-in-law's departure, the situation would resolve itself, but that wasn't the case. Rosalia filed a police report against her and simultaneously submitted a lawsuit. Following Elisa's advice, Serena submitted a request through a good acquaintance for the investigative authorities to review the case related to Esma's mother's death. They did not refuse her. The evidence of Rosalia's involvement in the accident was proven, and she was sentenced to several years in a women's colony. It seemed that justice had prevailed, but Serena didn't feel satisfied. She felt pity for her mother-in-law, who, in her twilight years, would have to serve her sentence. The trial attracted media attention, and Serena testified as a witness during the proceedings. After the judge announced the verdict, Serena approached the cage where her greatly aged mother-in-law sat. "Rosalia, I won't abandon you, I'll send you packages," the elderly woman hissed. "I'll never forgive you for this. And if I survive, I will take my revenge on you." Serena recoiled from the cage and hurried to leave the courtroom. 5 years passed. After the turmoil surrounding her husband's death, Serena's life gradually improved. She met a decent man and married him. Soon, the family welcomed a third child, whom the older siblings, Zacharias and Esma, adored. It was a boy, and during a family council, it was decided to name him Alvaro. It seemed life was bursting with new colors, but Serena felt no joy. She walked around constantly looking over her shoulder. Her mother-in-law often appeared in her dreams, and she remembered her last words, "If I survive, I will take my revenge on you." These visions were so vivid that they would wake her up in the middle of the night. Bernardo Baines, Serena's second husband, endured these nightly episodes for a long time, but eventually couldn't take it anymore. "Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" And the woman recounted her somewhat joyful, somewhat sorrowful story to her husband. He thought for a long while, then said with understanding, "You should see a specialist. I know a good psychologist. Also, I think we should change our place of residence. This apartment will always remind you of the past." Serena agreed with her husband, and a month later they celebrated their housewarming in a new neighborhood. Bernardo was right, the change of residence helped even more than the psychotherapy sessions. One day, Serena was walking with the children in the city center. Sounds of music and children's laughter drifted from the park. Esma began to plead. "Mom, it sounds like a fun party over there. Can we go check it out?" Zacharias supported his older sister. "Yeah, it's been a while since we had any fun." Even little Alvaro chimed in with something in support of his brother and sister. They walked to the alley, to the place buzzing with excitement. A clown, who was leading the entertainment program, announced a drawing contest for those interested. "Kids, girls and boys, today is a special day when you can draw your dream on the pavement with colorful chalk." Pushing through the crowd, Esma dashed to the stage. One of the conditions of the contest was to create the drawing within a limited time. Esma finished faster than the other participants and received the well-deserved prize. The girl jumped for joy. "Mom, I won. Do you want to see my picture?" "Of course, I do." Serena called her older son. "Zacharias, let's go enjoy your sister's artwork." On the pavement, Esma had drawn funny little people with her hand. 2 of them were floating in the clouds, while the others were frolicking on the grass, and only one figure was underground. Serena felt a wave of horror. She sensed the symbolism in her daughter's drawing. "Esma, I didn't decipher your intention." The girl smirked. "There's nothing to decipher. In the clouds are Mom and Dad, and on the meadow are us." Serena pointed with a twig to the most ominous character. "And who is this?" Esma squinted her eyes. "Didn't you guess? That's Grandma Rosalia. I'll never forgive her, not even after 100 years, for causing my mom's death." Serena shuddered from the wave of hatred radiating from her teenager. She tried to remind her adoptive daughter that there were still many good people in the world. It was wrong to wish for another person's death. But her lengthy speech did not convince the girl. "Mom, you're too kind and ready to forgive everyone. I'm very lucky to have you. I even understand you. But still, I can't forgive Rosalia. I no longer consider her my grandmother." Serena realized that a deep, unhealed wound had remained in her adoptive daughter's heart for life. But, as she had promised, she sent packages and parcels to her former mother-in-law, who was serving her sentence. Serena wrote her letters, but in return, there was silence. Rosalia never thanked her for the parcels. Bernardo was aware that his wife was supporting her former mother-in-law, who had wanted to send her to the other world over the inheritance. One day, the man couldn't take it anymore and asked, "Serena, this isn't right. Why are you doing this if the person doesn't deserve mercy?" The woman sighed and looked into her husband's eyes. "Bernardo, every person, even a criminal, deserves mercy. I do this in memory of Manuel. Despite his troubled childhood, he never abandoned his mother." The man replied irritably, "Do what you want. But I wouldn't advise you to cling so tightly to the past. That connection will always pull you back, and that means it will hinder your life." Serena pondered her husband's words for a long time, but in the end, she was forced to admit that he was right. "If I keep hanging in this suspended state, one day Bernardo will get tired of it, and he'll leave me." It took incredible effort for the woman to rid herself of the habit of looking back. She began to feel happy again. Only one unpleasant incident once clouded this happiness. One autumn day, Clarissa called her. After the traditional greetings, the relative asked, "Have you heard that your mother-in-law has been released?" To her surprise, Serena replied calmly, "I'm no longer interested in the fate of that woman. And, to be honest, I don't even want to know anything about her." Clarissa sighed. "She asked me for shelter, and I couldn't refuse her. After all, she's still family. Rosalia stayed with me for about a month, and then she went to a women's monastery to atone for her sins. I didn't keep her. Let her cleanse her soul before she dies. She has many sins." Serena only asked her relative, "Did she ask about the grandchildren?" The answer came immediately. "She did. She cried a lot. To be honest, I feel sorry for her. May God forgive her sins, and I won't hold any grudges."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.